Hello and welcome to, I was just about to say the front three, but I just stopped. It's our new show. It's the Red Zone. It's going to be our in-depth discussion, a weekly show. It'll be our staple show, if you like, on all things Liverpool. And which way sort of a better way to kick off the Red Zone show with David Lynch, previously of the Evening Standard, the Goal, Liverpool Echo, but more from David soon. But first, we must and we have to touch on the greatest game that I witnessed anyway. And a lot has been said about the World Cup, and well, football is a sport loved by billions, and it has the power sort of to bring people together and bring a real sense of community, regardless of cultural differences. For many, football is a source for inspiration and joy, and that's what we've seen, and that's what we've witnessed today. It was much like a fairy tale, and what a fairy tale, was played out in before us and on our TV screens today. And it was football's favorite son, Argentina's favorite son, overcoming all the challenges and the adversities of yesteryear and sort of finally laying his hand on that 18-karat gold trophy. And what a befitting end for a true sporting icon. It was emotional, it was inspiring, and it was powerful for me as well. And what a befitting end for Lionel, from Diego to Leo. And it was brilliant to see. But I felt drained after watching that final. I don't know how you guys felt. David, how was it?
Yeah, it was draining. One of the most sort of emotional football matches as well. Just brilliant quality everywhere, a bit of chaos, and yeah, just an amazing spectacle. And to sort of top it off with Lionel Messi getting his hands on the trophy, which I think, okay, I know there are a lot of Cristiano Ronaldo fans out there, and there's maybe the argument over who is the best of all time. But for me, the best of all time. And so to see him sort of complete his legacy, complete football almost by getting his hands on the trophy, it felt pretty special and a really nice end to probably the greatest World Cup final we've ever seen, I think.
The debate will rage, or has it just sort of put it to bed tonight?
I think, well, in my eyes, it's been put to bed for a long, long time. You said the greatest game, Asim, but you need to calm down with that. There's a few games that we've been involved in. David said it right. It's the greatest World Cup final game that since I've been born. Fantastic, and I think with Lionel and Cristiano as well, I think we appreciate them more because we've seen them come through. Like I was, just a tad sort of young when Diego Maradona hit the heights at Napoli, Barcelona, and for Argentina, obviously. But with Lionel and Cristiano Ronaldo, we've seen him sort of from the age of 17, coming from Sporting or Barcelona, and sort of that trajectory that they've been on. And it's been incredible. And, last year when they won the Copa America, I just felt that, Scaloni, for the first time, he's got a team that can play good football, that have got Messi, but they've got players of the dark arts, like the Rodrigo de Pauls and the dirty players that can just see that period from the 70th till the full time, just to see it through and don't get complacent. But today it was a game of there was no complacency. It was just back and forth. Spare a thought for Kylian Mbappe. I thought he was just magnificent, especially from the last 20 minutes. He had a quiet 70 minutes, but then he came alive, and it was amazing. It was an amazing final, amazing spectacle. And on a footballing term, it was one of the best sort of World Cup tournaments that I've ever seen.
David, Avi mentioned the word spectacle, and I think that's what I was sort of really annoyed, because when France couldn't string two passes together for about 60, 70 minutes, and I was thinking, is it the pitch? Is it their tactics? But it wasn't the pitch or the tactics, because Argentina were playing a completely different game. They were absolutely brilliant up until they got their first penalty.
Yeah, I think you look across the entire game, and I think that Argentina it would have been a bit of a travesty, really, despite the Mbappe hat trick for Argentina not to win it, because they were so dominant for such large periods of it, and it was just all about, for them, I think, just massive intensity. They were just on France all the time, didn't allow them to play, and you did wonder at the start whether sort of, was the flu or the virus that's been going through the France squad, did that have an effect? And was that why Argentina were able to be so much more intense? But then, you see that the France response towards the end of the game, and when they had sort of nothing left to lose and they just went for it, you'd see that maybe they were playing within themselves a little bit. And maybe the coach didn't get things right in terms of his tactics, and changed that. And, yeah, it was just, it's just testament to sort of Argentina's intensity, as I say, in terms of how they were able to suppress France for large parts, and probably were unlucky that it got dragged to extra time, really. And then to get pulled back to 3-3 as well. So, I think, that was what made it so interesting. That's what made football interesting generally, is that you can have a team be so dominant in the game, and yet moments of luck will keep you in it and take it to penalties. But I think it would have been if Argentina hadn't come out the other side of it. As great a game as it was, you probably wanted to see the rightful winner take it in the end.
Yeah, most certainly. Kieran, who's always ever present in our on our shows, he goes, Argentina today reminded me of the 1920 Liverpool. Was all about the midfield today. And I don't know, a player that's been linked to us, Avi, Enzo Fernandez, he was absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to hold my hands up. I think I saw his last game and I thought he didn't have the mobility. There was a few times he got caught on the ball and he looked a bit, I don't know, he didn't look the sort of robust midfielder that we needed. But today, in that 6 role, he was brilliant. And then the passing, the progressive passes, how many times he snuffed out danger. It was a joy to see.
Yeah, and obviously, we speak to Moby all the time, who spots all these youngsters on Twitter, and he posts it, and he's been going on about Enzo Fernandez for the best part of a year now. And he said, this kid coming out of River Plate, he's going to be a player. And then obviously he gets his move to Benfica, where he's playing well. And then in the Argentina, I know he didn't start against us. He didn't start against Saudi Arabia, but then he was brought on, and then Julian Alvarez, who I just thought both of them brought a bit of youth, a bit of energy, a bit of passion into that team that was much needed. And Enzo Fernandez never looked back from that. He played well. I thought today for the first 70 minutes, he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, cleaning up, passing, just rotating the ball really well until up until France came into it. And then I thought he started to tire. But yeah, fully deserved the Young Player of the Tournament award. And I'm sure David will give us a little insight whether the talks with Liverpool is true or not. But yeah.
I'll more of that Enzo talk later, as we've sort of got our targets, and we'll talk sort of in detail about our targets and what sort of players we're looking to bring in. But look, David's in the house. We have to use this opportunity to sort of take advantage and get his insight into what's been happening around Liverpool and its ownership issue, especially, David, with so many senior figures leaving or planning to leave at the end of the season. And I think on the 4th of December, you wrote an exclusive about the consortium between Saudi and the Qatari sort of pact coming and sort of registering their interest in taking over Liverpool. And sort of give us your thoughts about that and what is the general latest with that reported interest in Liverpool.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. The Qatari Saudi thing, I think, sort of indicative of the idea that there's so much interest that sort of you're in a position where some of these private businessmen are being pushed together. Is it best to pool the resources rather than go up against each other? Interestingly, and I think this sort of gives you really good insight into how fast these things move and how quickly things change, is that I've had a conversation this week, and it's a bit of an exclusive for you guys, I suppose. I've had a conversation this week that suggests that those Qatari and Saudi businessmen were maybe toying with the idea of actually going separately now, which sort of, again, shows you these things are changing all the time. This is going to be a long process before Liverpool gets bought. I think, because, we saw how quickly it moved with Chelsea in terms of their sale, but that was such a different situation because of the time pressures that were put on it by the Roman Abramovich situation. I think Liverpool's going to be very different and things are going to move very quickly around that. But there's still all that other interest. Nobody's really at the point of putting in a full bid yet. There's interest, I've been told, from Germany, we know and we expected American interest, and that is definitely there as well. And potentially there's been, again, a conversation I had this week, potentially some interest from Abu Dhabi, but it's such early stages that it's sort of hard to nail things down at. When I wrote the Qatari Saudi story, maybe taking a risk at that time because these things are so early days that, you can put something out there and it can change very quickly. And I think on that front, the most recent conversations I've had suggested it has changed slightly, but like I say, it could all come back together again. It could, it's really is early days in the process. We've got a long way to go, but there is a lot of interest out there, and that's sort of the first encouraging sign that there's a lot of people out there who want to take the club forward.
But I don't know if you wanted to come in, Avi, but David, is it just a case of FSG testing the waters then? Sort of getting to know what sort of parties are coming, there is some talk of FSG in the papers and all over Twitter that John Henry, Avi's best friend, is sort of leaning towards a strategic partner. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of that stuff comes from the sort of FSG side of things, and my personal take is that I don't quite buy it, because I think that's something that's been out there in the past anyway. I think it's been long known that Liverpool were looking for an investment partner, and I don't think that person has stepped forward. I also don't quite see the appeal of someone coming in as a minority partner, having very little control, but offering up a lot of money for a sort of a small stake and not really anything, getting a great deal back from it. And the fact that the FSG didn't immediately shoot down the takeover story when it came out through The Athletic, I think sort of tells you everything, because in the past they've been quite firm really in knocking that sort of stuff down and saying privately, they would at least brief that, we're not looking to sell at the moment, we're only looking for the partner. I think they were more open to the idea when it was put to them this time around. And I think also Mike Gordon stepping away is a really, really good indication that, he's been such an important figure at Liverpool, so hands-on over recent years, the go-to man really for Jurgen Klopp, his man in Boston, who he most closely communicates with. And for him to step back from his day-to-day role suggests that something has changed, and that's something, to my understanding, is that they're much more open to a sale now. And I think you've got to keep it out there if you're FSG, the idea that, okay, we might just look for a minority partner, because you want to drive the idea that Liverpool can't just be bought. They're not just trying to throw it away. They're not just trying to get rid of it as quickly as they can. I think they need to push the idea that they're only willing to accept a bumper offer, and that is still the case. That is definitely true. But also they are much more willing to negotiate than they have been at previous times while they've been in charge of the club.
Avi, do you want to come into that?
Yeah, no, I think I've got to echo David's words that with the FSG, and I know, John Henry and Tom Werner, and that they get their fair share of critics on Twitter and stuff, but I think they do want what's right for the club. They do want to find the right custodians for this football club. We know how that's gone in the past with, David Moores, and Rick Perry. Unfortunately, they were sort of duped or, faults promised by Hicks and Gillette that the club would be in good hands, but it wasn't. And then from there on, when Martin Broughton and sort of Christian Purslow took over affairs to get a proper sale, we did get the right owners in. So I think John Henry is not, I don't think that he's looking for a quick buck here. I think it means a lot to him that, the club does go in safe hands. And maybe, early on, I remember when I mentioned to you, I said on the show, a few weeks back that, I believe it would be American because, it's just an easier transition. But like the changes that we've seen with Julian Ward now resigning next season, or at the end of the season, Mike Gordon moving sort of in a different sort of transitional position in his role. Maybe it could be that we do invite Middle Eastern, groups to take over.
But Avi, you mentioned the word, sort of the custodians, the right custodians. And yes, FSG will make sure that the club is handed to the right people. And, the Premier League will do their own, sort of thorough checks. But why shouldn't we sort of begrudge them of getting the best deal for FSG? And we all talk about this legacy that they want to leave, and they've been absolutely brilliant. Doesn't matter what you think, you can be the most anti-FSG guy around. Stop looking at me like that, Avi.
No.
Doesn't matter who you are, you have to sort of hold your hands up and respect the way they have done things at Liverpool, the way sort of their policies, the processes, their data planning, and it's been, absolutely very, very clinical and shrewd on their behalf. But now is the time for them to sell, and this is not. They know what they're doing. They put that statement out. Surely they're just going to get the best price, no?
Yeah, I mean, we do live in like a fickle world where we think that there are honest people out there, but there are, they've put their hands up very quickly in this, Asim, and admitted that look, we've taken the club as far as we can, and I think now is the right time to maybe look for earlier on it was a partial sort of investment into the club, but now it's full throttle ahead. It's probably a takeover. So they've admitted quite early on now, in their tenure, I know they've been here for 10, 11 years, but they finally admitted that, look, we may need to release, our hands off this club. And, yes, whoever offers us more money, let's sell it. I don't think it's easy as that. I think they will look at owners who are coming into this club, who are coming to the club with the right sort of approach, with the honest approach. This club does need investment. It does need the likes of, a Henzo Fernandez coming in, a Jude Bellingham. We do want to be amongst the best. Why shouldn't we? We're Liverpool Football Club. We back in the day of the 70s and 80s, we were buying the best players, and why shouldn't we? We've got Jurgen Klopp. We've got to appeal to him. We've got to use his pull that he's managed to get us into this position, and we've got to keep up with the Cities and Chelseas and maybe even Arsenal's these days and United's, because they're not letting up in their spending. And we know with our approach, when we spend, we've shown 8-9 times out of 10 we spend well. So it's all about equipping Jurgen with the right owners, and I think the Americans will take that. I mean, Henry will take that into account as well. Who's the right fit, not just for the club, but for the management as well, like for Jurgen Klopp, because we know that he's got a very good cordial relationship with, John, Tom, if you want to chuck in Linda in there as well, you can. But, I think for Jurgen, it matters as well of who comes in.
David, in your article, you mentioned, sort of this bid, this consortium, this sort of double act from, the Arab world is sort of private investors, but inevitably they do have links to the state. Is it going to be something like what we saw at Newcastle, where the initial bid came in, it got rejected, they had to go back? And, who are these people? Do we know anything about them?
Well, they're trying to keep that very quiet at the moment. Anyone who, and that's not just the people from the Middle East who are interested, but this is every investor who's sort of sounding out, the club potentially about getting involved at the moment. Are trying to keep their names off it, and I understand why. I think if you're a billionaire and you've got enough money to buy Liverpool, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where everybody knows you're trying to do it, and then if you don't get it over the line, it looks like you failed. Because these people who've made an awful lot of money, not really used to having their reputation dragged in that way, and don't want to be seen to be failed to buy the club, and so that's why there's so much mystery. I think to answer your question about the links between the state and private companies, that's going to be an interesting one if it is a takeover from the Middle East. I think in a lot of countries in that region, it's very hard to separate the two. There are always typically very strong links between the major companies or the major private companies and the state in terms of the way they work. So that's going to be a difficult one, probably one that fans have to weigh up how comfortable they feel with it. And also a question for the Premier League, the FA and UEFA, really, because, you could have a Saudi investment comes in, and if there are strong ties to the state, there, that causes potential issues in terms of competitiveness, because we know that the Newcastle bid, despite the fact the Premier League cleared it saying there was no ties to the Saudi state, I think we're all slightly cynical about that. It's the Saudi Public Investment Fund. It couldn't be more, tightly linked to the state really than it is. So, if you were to get private investors from Saudi, could they extricate the two? Could they say that they were completely separate? I think that's a big debate that the Premier League has to have, UEFA as well. And the same goes for Qatar. If there were a Qatari business to take over who was strongly linked to the state, there would also then be ties to potentially PSG and playing in the same competition in the Champions League. So it's a big issue, and one that, any potential investors who, potentially from that region is probably more of an issue for them. They would have to make the case that those ties aren't so great, and that they, there's not a problem in terms of the competition with the Qatari state and PSG or Saudi and Newcastle being in the same competitions as those. It's a really interesting one.
We don't care who it is. We just want Mbappe and Bellingham and Enzo to all come in January, yeah?
No, I think our approach should be what we're doing similarly, but obviously loosen the purse strings a little bit. We know that this midfield issue has needed to be addressed 2 summers ago, and we're still sort of playing catch up and hoping for the likes of Naby to be staying fit for a full course of the season. But yeah, no, obviously there's been huge talk of Jude Bellingham in the last sort of year and a half. And we want young players at the club, but we want the best players at the club too. I'm not asking for Mbappe. We know with the wages that he's on, even with new owners in, I don't want us to go into that sort of market where we're paying 300,000-400,000 a week for footballers. I still want to keep our club, to stay true to its traditions, but just loosen the purse strings when it comes to transfer fees.
Just to come in on that, actually, the interesting thing is, I think there's the consensus I get from just looking at social media is the sense that American owners will be bad because they will be tight with the money, and then Middle Eastern owners will be different. And I don't think it's always necessarily will work like that as well. I think I don't have any skin in the game in terms of who comes out on top of this. It is what it is, and it's going to be an interesting story to see how it develops. But the one thing I would say about American owners is, I think Fenway Sports Group have given them a bad rep in terms of how they operate in the transfer market. You only have to look at Todd Bowley at Chelsea in terms of they've spent an awful lot of money and seem to be in for sort of every player who becomes available at the moment. The one thing I would say about Chelsea's approach is it's very scattergun and not very targeted. What Liverpool perhaps need is someone who will come in, see the existing structure that's there in terms of the way that transfers operate, but just give a little bit more money, to a bit more backing to sort of find these great players before, and bring them into the club. I think that you don't necessarily have to have American owners who come in and maybe be tight in the transfer market and won't use the club's money in the way that we want to see it used.
Well, David, just before I read out Adnan's question, but do you see something similar where Liverpool put some sort of clause in the sale where, just as we saw Chelsea went for a certain amount, but they had a commitment from Bowley saying, yeah, we have to spend a certain amount on players. Do you see something similar to Liverpool?
I can't see it just because of the nature of the two sales is completely different, and I think there's not necessarily Liverpool don't have the huge stadium issue as well, which Chelsea clearly do. That's going to be a huge one for them to solve an issue, and that was part of the reason that extra funding had to be committed to, is because they needed someone who would come in and solve the stadium issue there. Liverpool don't quite have that, so they don't. I can't see there being sort of any commitment being pushed in terms of it has to be this amount of future investment. I think whoever's going to take charge of Liverpool will have to make that argument, not just to FSG in terms of, create the best offer for FSG, but also I'm sure we will hear a lot in terms of as supporters, there will be leaks and information coming out from the various parties the further down the line we get in terms of saying, we can do this for you in the transfer market, we can do this at the academy, and I'm sure all that is to come. So that's something to be prepared for. Yeah,
most certainly. Yeah, I think I echo those statements about Liverpool are in a lot better position, and FSG again, credit to them, they've laid the foundations, and this is what sort of puts them in the position for them to, ask, a reasonable price, and I'm sure they'll get it. And as we've seen, there's been plenty of parties interested in the last month or so. But what Adnan is saying is, does the delay in the sale of the club limit our ambitions to buy in the upcoming transfer windows? Because when the talk came out, Liverpool, all the fans thought, we're guaranteed some signings and we're going to splash the cash, if you like. And now it's gone a bit quiet. Maybe it's because of the World Cup. Maybe we'll see some news coming out in the next week or so. But what is Adnan right? Does the delay in the sale of the club limit our ambitions in the upcoming transfer window?
I wouldn't say so, because I think, it might limit their ambitions if the idea is to maybe sign Kylian Mbappe in January. I can't see that happening. But if in terms of, it will just be business as usual as far as FSG are concerned. I don't think, I don't expect a huge signing in the January window. For example, Jude Bellingham, I think that's definitely one for the summer. But what I would say is that, say Jude Bellingham was available in January, I don't think FSG would think twice about signing him, only on the basis that, the way transfer fees work in terms of the spread, they're amortized over the length of the contract. So it's not that huge 100 million spend coming out of the club's cash coffers. And therefore that hits the bottom line when the new ownership comes in. It doesn't quite work like that. It's a constantly moving feast in terms of which players you have contracted and how much their fees are spread out over the length of the contract you sign them on. So, the ability to spend is there, and it has been for a while. I think, Liverpool would have had a bigger summer last summer had Aurelien Tchouameni decided he didn't want to go to Real Madrid instead. So that money is there. That's why I'm convinced that Liverpool can do big things in the sort of upcoming windows. I know a lot of journalists have previously promised that. I've not really ever gone down that route, but I know, just looking at the books and the way that the club works, the potential to go big is still there, and for Liverpool to do whatever they feel they need to in January and then the summer, whether the sale has happened before then or not.
So, but Avi, why are we seeing so many senior figures leave at Liverpool? Then is there a link between the sort of rumblings on with the ownership issue and this sort of notion where Liverpool are changing approach, if you like? We have Klopp, who's had a brilliant team backing him. give him the research, give him the scouting sort of data over the last, since he's been here. And there isn't a need for that sort of approach now. And we have a senior figurehead in the management. And we also need to mention the influence of Pep Lijnders. I know you like him and like his book as well. You've got it on your shelf, I can see in the back. But is it Liverpool changing approach? Is it Liverpool just clearing the desks for the new ownership to take over? Or is it a bit of both, Avi?
I think it's a bit of both. I think you always need like an analytical team, behind you when it comes to transfers. It can't just be, we're going to suddenly go in for all like, the superstars of this world, like the Nkunkus and the Jude Bellinghams. We will still be sort of scouting throughout the world, especially in Europe, to find that gem, where we will probably buy another 30-40 million pound player and turn him into an 89 million pound player within a year and a half, under Klopp's stewardship. So I think it's a bit of both. The timing, isn't really pretty with Julian Ward leaving, but it could just be that our direction will change in the next sort of 4 or 5 transfer windows, where we might feel that, we've got to sort of maybe change tact and bring in another sporting director. And I'm pretty sure that position will not be null and void. I'm pretty sure we will bring someone in. I know there was talk of Sven Mislintat, which I didn't believe much of, but that's been shrugged off and denied now. Ever since that there was links with that, but I'm pretty sure that there will be talks with some sporting directors around Europe that we may want to bring in, and that could mean with new owners, new approach, new targets, new money. But the existing model, it has come into sort of like a stalemate where we're not probably getting the players that we want, and the players that we did want, like Tchouaméni, opted to go to Madrid. Some said that deal was set in stone, and and some people were saying that that money went to Darwin Núñez. It didn't go towards Darwin Núñez. We were always looking for a forward player because I think the club, really knew quite early on in the year that Sadio Mane wanted to go, pastures new. So there is money to get in a midfield, and I think if there's adequate targets, if there's if the selling clubs are willing to negotiate in January, I'm sure we'll bring in a player.
I think we've got our first super chat, Avi. We got the email from YouTube that we're allowed super chats. I think we need to frame this, take a picture of it. And
I'll put it on this side of the wall.
Ordering Seeker, thank you very much for our first super chat, man. Big up. Great show, lads. Hoping we dig deep in January. Yeah, I think the feeling is mutual all around. But just touching on again and going deeper, David, into this power struggle, if you like, at Liverpool. Is there too much influence from Pep Lijnders? Are those just sort of reports coming out that he has too much influence on Klopp? Is it just are they untrue? Or if you look at the signings like Diaz, Jota, Núñez, they've all sort of been influenced heavily, from the Portugal sort of, from Portugal, and Lijnders has known these players on some sort of personal account as well in some cases. Is there too much influence from Pep? Is he pissing people off?
The one thing I would say on that is that it's worth mentioning that Julian Ward has got very strong links to Portugal as well. So that's had a huge influence on that as well. I've no doubt about that. And just to touch briefly, quickly on the power struggle that's sort of taken place there, or some of the departures as well. I do think the optics of it don't look fantastic when you lose so many people at once, particularly as Julian Ward's departure has come, or the announcement of his departure has come just 6 months after him sort of thinking that, yes, this is the role for me. I know there was a lot of talk around that, and Liverpool were very keen to make the point that, he's left his own volition. He's got a young family that, he's decided it's not for him, but it just doesn't look great 6 months on from him deciding that the role was for him to then sort of, it all come crashing down. And then you've got other departures like Ian Graham. It makes you slightly uncomfortable. And I do wonder what the next route they will take is. And I think the fact that Julian Ward and Ian Graham are in the roles till the summer, that does at least buy them some time to perhaps resolve this ownership situation. And then if you get new owners, it allows them to say, okay, this is the direction we want to go. We want a sporting director. We want it to be this person. But it doesn't look good. And it lends itself to theories about a power struggle. As for the Pep Lijnders thing, I think this is just a bit of a talking point on social media at the moment for me, to be honest. I think, I get what people are saying. I think a lot of people were very uncomfortable with the book being released, and that's fair enough. It doesn't look good if you release a book and then all of a sudden the results completely tank. It looks like you were sort of resting on your laurels a little bit. But it's also sort of smacks a little bit of. Do you remember when Liverpool just kept signing a succession of terrible goalkeepers, and John Achterberg was the huge problem at the club?
Yeah.
He was absolutely terrible at his job. He was clueless, and Liverpool would never have a successful goalkeeper while they had John Achterberg there. And then all of a sudden he signs Alisson, a keeper who's worthy of playing for a truly great Liverpool side, and suddenly he's the greatest goalkeeping coach since sliced bread. So it's a coin of phrase. I think with Pep Lijnders thing, I think he's catching a lot of heat at the moment for things that are not necessarily his fault. He's only as influential as he's ever been. I think he came back to the club. I remember meeting him in the hotel in Kiev actually, and him sort of saying he was coming back, which was a bit of a shock. He said he was coming back the next season, and that's been a hugely influential moment in terms of, because every trophy that Liverpool have won under Jurgen Klopp has come since he came back. So that, you can't say he's hugely influential now and it's a complete negative, and then disregard that he was hugely influential from the point he came back and he won all these trophies. I just don't quite buy into that. I think it's one of those conspiracy theories that tends to knock around when the results aren't good, and people start to look for scapegoats. And maybe it is some element of truth that some of the power has shifted slightly, particularly as we see around transfers now. And Jurgen Klopp has certainly got more power in the short term. Going forward until that sporting director situation resolves itself. But I don't quite buy the idea that Pep Lijnders is now all powerful and that's the reason that things aren't going quite right on the pitch.
Avi, do you want to add to the conspiracy?
No, I think David hits the nail on the spot. Look, I'm going to openly say I'm not his biggest fan, but I think the book release.
Do you mean Pep or me?
Oh no! You're great, David. Back onto Lijnders, I think the book release, I think that's what, it's a bit off seeing a number 2 release a book, while he's still at the club. We've had great number 2s around, under Fergie, Steve McLaren, Brian Kidd, Carlos Queiroz. Never saw them sort of in the limelight as Pep Lijnders is in modern day football. But maybe that's because of the modern day and because of the way social media works, and maybe it's because of Jurgen's giving him that little bit of freedom and, go and express yourself. Because, Pep Lijnders, I'm sure, wants to be a coach, and he was, he had a short stint at Holland. It was just more of the timing of the book and how the season sort of, started for us, and maybe I got caught up in that as well. But yeah, hopefully results change once the boys are back from the World Cup.
I would say about the book as well, and I think, do you know what? I think the criticism, some of that is fair. I think sometimes you've just got to be very careful in football about patting yourself on the back, possibly ever. Maybe wait till the end of your career to do the book, because I just think in situations like this where Liverpool have allowed that to happen, and then the results have tanked, it really doesn't look good. And I'd agree. I think some of the criticism around that is maybe fair, and some of it maybe goes a little bit too far.
Okay, guys, silly season is upon us, and we'll be seeing plenty of more names linked with Liverpool. But how do you see Liverpool approach January, David? I know Jude has been mentioned, Sofian Amrabat, Saicedo. I know Avi's a massive fan of his. But with Diaz out for another 2-3 months, Jota not back for another month or so, probably a bit longer than that, do we sort of reassess our targets, our options in January? Because all the talk was about we lack this sort of power in midfield. Do you see Liverpool going out for maybe an attacker, or is it still that department in midfield that we need to sort of reinforce in?
I mean, generally, when it comes to the January window in Liverpool, I always err on the side of they're probably not going to do anything, just because if you do that more times than often, you're sort of more likely to be right. But I think that, whether they need something or not, I think there's definitely a case to be made that we all know about the midfield issue. Whether they'll solve that in January, I don't know, or look to even, go for a short-term option, I don't know, because we know Artemelo is getting close, someone who they thought could just get them by this season. I know it's been a disastrous signing so far, to be honest, but, if they genuinely believe that he could get them by this season, then let's see it. He's getting quite close to coming back. Naby Keita is available again, not everybody's favourite player, but someone who can, last season was a very important player for Liverpool, played a lot of games in a team that won every week.
He got injured coming off that camel.
Do you think is that it? Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully he can stay away from camels and keep himself fit. He played a lot of games last season in a team that won every week. So, that's important to have him back. Oxlade-Chamberlain played more times than he thought he might last season. Henderson's come back into the fold. Obviously, we hope Fabinho can rediscover his form. Is there maybe enough? There's at least enough bodies in midfield there to hopefully get Liverpool by. In the attack, as I agree, is a little bit of an issue. I actually thought it was a bit of an issue at the start of the season, to be honest. I think Liverpool left themselves light there. You lose Divock Origi and Minamino. It's a lot of goals last season and a lot of sort of impacts off the bench. So to not have them there was important. And, you're putting a lot of pressure on Harvey Elliott and then Fabio Carvalho to be the replacements. And the difficulty is that Fabio Carvalho is obviously a kid as well. And he's not a prolific Premier League goal scorer, so that caused you issues. And then obviously Harvey Elliott is been a nailed-on midfielder since the start of the season, so he isn't a forward option at all. So you're at least on numbers there, you're short. So I think that is something that if Liverpool are happy to wait till the summer to sort everything with the midfield and maybe go for a couple of really big buys there, then maybe they should get ahead of it and sort the forward issue now, because I think it is an issue. I think they do lack a little bit of firepower. And yes, they've been unlucky with the injuries and them all being on that left-hand side. But I did think at the start of the season there was a little bit of an issue there. So, it's certainly something they should probably look to solve in January, particularly as we're in the situation with Roberto Firmino's contract as well. That sort of throw that in the mix. And they're looking a bit light there, I think.
Avi, what do you think? Are we looking a bit light with the front three, especially, like I said, Diaz out and Jota? It was interesting to see Ox on the left in the last friendly.
Yeah, and he's done that role before, and not too badly, actually, off the left. I don't want to see him in a false nine or what Klopp
We've tried that as well.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of Ox. I'm not a big fan of Ox.
Who are you a fan of?
So, I'm a big fan of Naby. I've been always a big fan and supporter of Naby, but obviously the injuries haven't helped. I think we will address the midfield issue. If there's one player that I think we could go out and maybe just entice Brighton and their owner Tony Bloom, it would be for Moises Caicedo. I think they do want big money. I thought he had a good tournament. And I think we're looking at 60-70 million. Whether we can stump that up in January, I'm not too sure. But Jude and perhaps premature talk of Enzo, that's probably for the summer. Can't see Benfica parting ways or Dortmund, especially as Dortmund are still in the Champions League. But for Moises Caicedo, could be one that we chase. Amrabat was okay, but I'm not a big fan of players having a good tournament for 3-4 games and then whatever it was, that 5-6 games, and then signing for a top club. I'm not a big fan of that. We've done that with Salif Diao in 2002 and El Hadji Diouf, but the less said the better. I think for me, the realistically would be Moises Caicedo. And, I stand behind, Arthur as well. Like, I was a big fan when he did sign. I've seen the guy play for Barcelona and, he's never had a chance. And yes, he's been a bit of a party animal, but if there's one club that can sort him out, and especially being with the Brazilians, like Alisson and Firmino, who are, very much in tune with their faith, and Arthur could, follow suit. I think there's a player in there with Arthur Melo for the back end of the last sort of 4 or 5 months of the season.
I think the Caicedo one's quite interesting. I noted with interest that the wording of the Sky report, which was very much there's interest, but Brighton don't want to sell, and if they did sell, it'd be big money. It was sort of very much. It felt to me like a report that was very much Brighton laying out their position for January, which is that if and we know this is true of Brighton, if you bid enough money, then they will part with the prize assets, because that's the way the club is run. So. I think if Liverpool really, really like Caicedo, and I know he's someone they've watched quite closely, but if they think he's the one who could come in and maybe be, hopefully a partner to Jude Bellingham, if they can get him in the summer, which again, they're the front runners for. If they really think that, then the opportunity to get him in January sounds like it's there, because that seemed to me, just the way I judged it, was Brighton sort of setting out their position, really.
And I think, as I'm just coming on that, I think there's one thing that we can't do is stand still. We've shown that in January we have and can do business. We've done that with obviously Van Dijk from Southampton, with Luis Diaz. We brought him in last January. We can do business if an opportunity arises. I think we will do business, but we can't stand still. We can't all of a sudden presume that yes, Naby's had a run out against Milan. Thiago won't break down. Naby won't break down again. Arthur. Fabinho's, I think Fabinho needs a long rest. I think he's had a rest at the World Cup. I think he only played like, a couple of minutes here and there. We can't sort of rely on what we've got right now. We've got to bring some fresh impetus into that team.
David, let's play a manager for a minute or two then. You're telling me Liverpool only going to do business if it's sort of the right opportunity, but you do sort of understand the frustration on social media and, the Liverpool fans that you talk to. Sometimes there's a feeling amongst fans where Liverpool don't go for a player when it's really, really needed. And now, when you look at the situation, I've not had a look at the table. I've stopped looking at the table since, our bad start, sort of started at the start of the season. But I think we're sixth. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we're sort of about 7 to 8 points behind Spurs, albeit Spurs have a game. We played a game less than Spurs. But surely this is the opportunity. This is the sort of situation where Liverpool need to go out of their comfort zone. And if they have to pay a premium for a player and consolidate their fourth position come end of the season, then so be it.
I think Liverpool's argument in that situation has always been sort of, we won't go for the short term, and we won't buy a player just to think that it might get us over the line in a certain season, because they would argue that, there's so many signings you make that don't go quite right, and therefore there's no guarantee that spending money in January gets you over the line in the top four race at the moment. But I think it's so obvious, and I've been saying this from the early parts of the season, that there's a when you put the team on the pitch, there's a sort of shortage of quality in a certain area, which is quite obviously the central midfield. Okay, you can wait for those forwards to come back, and hopefully that issue will slightly resolve itself until the summer. But yeah, the midfield, there is a lack of quality there, and it was something that needed to get sorted in the summer. They knew it needed to get sorted in the summer, and when they missed out on Tchouaméni, thought they could get by. And I think it sort of, was, you can call it complacency, a little bit of arrogance, but wasn't was very much not the right decision to make, and that's been proved, borne out by the start of this season. I just think they need to get ahead of this midfield issue, because it's coming up anyway. I don't understand why they let it just roll over to next summer anyway, because I think James Milner's going, Naby Keita's going, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's going. So just in terms of sheer weight of bodies, you actually need to start getting someone in. And say Liverpool go out and next summer they end up signing 3 central midfielders, or maybe 2, but why not start the adaptation process for one of those a season earlier, rather than sort of completely ripping up your midfield and starting again next summer? I couldn't get my head around it. So,
David, isn't that because of the lack of money?
No, I don't buy that, because I think the Tchouaméni money was there. I think, and like I say, it's not a war chest where you pull 100 million out of it if you sign Tchouaméni. It's over the length of the contract. So Liverpool could certainly have afforded to sign a midfielder, and that was within the plan. And Nunez was simply the Sadio Mane replacement. So I think the money should be there. I think, the main question is, can they get someone that they really, really like and they think is a long-term target? But, you listen to that Caicedo report today, and I think they very much could. I think the opportunities to do something are there, and I very much think they should, because, you don't want to get to next season doing your big midfield redesign and you're in the Europa League with Jude Bellingham and Enzo Fernandez in your central midfield. It's they're a bit better than that.
And I think one thing is, I think the club criminally, I think they just banked on Tchouaméni. I think they believed that was far down the line, and I think that would have been a done deal if Madrid had agreed a deal for Kylian Mbappe with PSG. But I think that U-turn then sort of got them scattering around and said, you know what, let's get the next best French thing that's coming out of Monaco, and let's get Tchouaméni. And I think that really sort of put our plans back. And, I'm sure there were players out there. I'm a big fan of Matheus Nunes, who's at Wolves now. I'm sure there were other players of that ilk that they could have got in. But, we know Jurgen can be a stubborn bastard at times. He only wants his number one choices when given the opportunity, like a Virgil van Dijk, like an Alisson. He is always sort of like adamant that, no, I'll get my, number one choices. But we've also seen that he's adapted, like the Julian Brandt, Mane, Salah, Götze. We know that they weren't first choices, but they've come in and obviously become world-class players. But I think with Tchouaméni, I think that sort of, that sort of got us in a bit of a frenzy, his rejection.
David, I don't know what you thought about Enzo tonight. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. And I know we touched on it. that last couple of games I've seen him, I've not been overly impressed. He's been very good, and I know he scored a cracker in the early part of the tournament. But today, sitting in that sort of alone pivot role, I thought he controlled it. Sort of started at the attacks, snuffed out danger, the little danger that France provided, especially for the first 50, 60 minutes. But we did a little piece on him, and I thought, because people were telling me, he's a box-to-box type of midfielder, a combative midfielder. But when we did a little piece about him, he basically, sort of is a Thiago type of midfielder, even though we saw, bits of everything tonight. Well, what do you make of him today?
Yeah, you can see a lot of what Liverpool like about him. And I think that the similarities to Thiago in terms of the way he profiles is interesting, because you've got the comment there that sort of mentions the piece I wrote about the Enzo Fernandez links. I've absolutely no doubt that Liverpool have got a very good idea of, well, they obviously know about his buyout clause, that everyone knows about that. But in terms of what he would expect to be paid were he to join the club, they'll be fully aware of that. They'll be in touch with his agents. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And that the reason I put "but" on the tweet that led into that piece was to try and get people to read it. So if you want to go and read it, please do. But also, to say that the idea of Jude Bellingham and Enzo Fernandez joining Liverpool in the same summer is not completely out of the question. Please don't take that as me saying yes, they're both definitely going to sign. I do think there's great reasons to be confident about Jude Bellingham signing, but it's not either or. I think a lot of clubs will be going into this window, sizing up both of them and maybe really pushing for the other if they don't get one. But I also think there is a possibility that they both end up at one club. If you're a club like Liverpool that desperately needs, 2 or 3 central midfielders to come in. So, the fact that they profile differently, that they could work together in a midfield, and Liverpool, as I say, are a club who should have the money there to splash the cash on the central midfielders. I can very much see, it's possible. It's not something that can be ruled out yet. I think it's an interesting summer's coming up, and if Liverpool could secure someone, imagine that 2 signings like Jude Bellingham and Enzo Fernandez would be absolutely incredible. Just sort of mouth-watering to think about particularly for a position that's been so criticised for so long. Liverpool's midfield to get in 2 huge young talents like that would be incredibly exciting. So it's possible. I'm not saying it's happening, but it's possible at least.
You got us excited just by saying it is possible, David. But Abi, do you think we put our eggs in one basket with the Jude signing? I don't want to say, look, we might sort of be bitten in the ass again, like we did with the Chouameni, that we put all our eggs in one basket. He ended up at Real Madrid, and all of a sudden, we don't go for anybody else. And look, Jude Bellingham is that sort of midfielder where Real Madrid, Man City will be interested.
Yeah, I think the noises and the videos that Henderson, Trent have been putting up, you know what? And there's people on Twitter, and it's sometimes on my timeline, it's Jude. And I'll say it like this: I'd be shocked if Jude Bellingham isn't a Liverpool player. I honestly would be shocked if he isn't a Liverpool player. You think that you would think that we've done some kind of groundwork, a long time ago. I'm not just talking about maybe the start of this season, but you think that maybe earlier this year there's some groundwork done. His dad is a big Liverpool fan, and I know that doesn't mean much. I know nowadays they just want to look after their sons, players, and just want to make sure what's right for the kid. And yes, monetary comes into it, but Jude Bellingham, the way he speaks, he's so mature for a 19-year-old. He's so intelligent. You just think that he's not about the money. He's not about the quick trophies, the rich mega clubs. He's done an interview where he said, like, the DKB Pogdal trophies that they've won, the FA Cup, he means so much to him because he knows the work that Zorc have put in and the board of directors in assembling a team. And he goes, it's hard work, and that means so much to him, rather than collectively just spending money. Like, he didn't mention so much, but like Bayern Munich, who have got the riches and are winning league titles after league titles. He goes, I'm not about that life, So you do imagine that a lot of the groundwork has been done in Jude Bellingham, and I'd be, and I think I've said it as well. It wouldn't surprise me if Liverpool do announce a Naby style deal where we confirm the signing of Jude for next season, quite possibly in the next month or so.
I would not go as far as to say that purely because my Twitter feed would just explode if I was to say that it's
Go on, David.
deal,
Give us something. Go on. Just give us something. Go on.
I think that I totally understand where the confidence from the Liverpool side in terms of getting it done now. I think it was something I sort of cast out a lot of doubt on before in the past in terms of saying, okay, if you're Jude Bellingham and you've got Real Madrid and Manchester City there, joining them is not necessarily just about the money as well. It's also about the idea that it's so much easier to win trophies at Man City. But I think what has clearly come out in the past couple of weeks and what is clearly his parents would prefer him to come back to England for starters, which probably puts Real Madrid at a disadvantage. But I think one of the biggest motivating factors for them to come to Liverpool, and I think something they find really attractive, is that Jude Bellingham's role in this Liverpool side is so obvious. It's just sat there waiting for him. The vacancy is there for him to come in and be the main man. Whereas if you go to Real Madrid, you look at Camavinga, what an incredible talent he is. He did his usual trick that he does for Real Madrid today in terms of coming on and sort of changing the match in France's favour. But he is a substitute largely at Real Madrid at the moment, and if you go to Manchester City, you've got Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, Rodri in that midfield. Bernardo Silva drops back into that midfield a lot, doesn't he? Those positions, particularly those number 8 positions, if you've got Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne there, you're not going to start every game. Whereas I think you could make the argument Jude Bellingham comes in and he is the main man in Liverpool's central midfield, and that looks very attractive. And you're also at a club with a manager who develops young talent, a great historic club with incredible fans, and obviously in most seasons where Liverpool aren't as terrible as they have been at the start of this one, there's a real shot at trophies there that, like you said, mean a lot as well. So you can see why Liverpool are considered favourites at the moment, because I think they've really, really made that sales pitch to him. And by the sounds of the comments and the things coming out from his family side, that has really landed. They've really convinced Bellingham that Anfield's place for him. It could all change in the next sort of couple of months or whatever. But at the moment, Liverpool leading the race, which is when you watch his World Cup and you just watch him at Dortmund, is incredibly exciting, I think.
And you can see how much, not only does he admire Steven Gerrard, you can see how much he admires Jordan Henderson. And Jordan's one of those types who's put his arm around, not just Jude Bellingham, but he's put his arm around a lot of the younger England players like the Sakas and Grealish. And that's why he's got so much utmost respect. And he gets his fair share of criticism, Jordan Henderson, from the media and from other fans. But you see his influence around the England team, how much respect they have for him. And that celebration, which game was it? Where he scored and he goes up to Jude Bellingham. They had that sort of bromance.
Senegal.
Don't know what was it, the Senegal game, wasn't it? You can see how much Jude Bellingham, he has that respect for Jordan Henderson, and the little games that he's been playing with Trent in training for the England camp. It just sort of bodes well. But yeah, like I said, I hope it's a foregone conclusion that Jude Bellingham's a Liverpool player.
Brilliant. Before we move on, I think I need to give a shout out to the Anfield Talk as well. I know some of the lads personally, Aaron and Ben. Big up and a big shout out to Anfield Talk. And please,
thanks for giving me the green emoji on Twitter. That's appreciated.
Top source.
That means that must be reliable.
Top tier. Yeah.
If someone comes, I've seen that as well. I put out something about 2-3 weeks ago, David, and people started tagging Anfield Talk, and I kept looking at my phone thinking, why is the Anfield Talk all of a sudden being tagged? It was people asking him, is this guy reliable? So I'm still waiting for my green tick. Maybe I'm
on the red zone. I'm right at the bottom of the file. I'm on the red dot. Yeah. I'm working myself up.
So big up. And we have our very own Gene in the house, who's, I think, I can't see the message. There it is. He goes, 100 of us watching. Please don't forget, press the like button. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. 100% echo those comments from Gene. He was watching Argentina today, David, with his mates, and he couldn't make it. Which he'll get a telling off after the show.
He's getting more than a telling off. Don't worry about that.
I'm not allowed to swear. So I'll put it kindly. But look, moving on quickly before we wrap things up. Let's put the transfer talk to a side. Let's put the ownership talk to a side. We've got to climb up that table, and we've got a cup game in about 3-4 days against City, and the fixtures are coming thick and fast straight after that.
Yeah, it sort of seems absolutely mad that 4 days after the World Cup finishes, Liverpool are in a Carabao Cup game. But something to really look forward to. I think, I think my enthusiasm has been slightly dampened by that Luis Diaz re-injury. I think that's just causes problems that Liverpool don't need, and they really, it would have. It's the cliche, but it would have genuinely felt like a new signing to get him back at this point of the season, and really sort of if he could have hit the ground running, then you would have felt that Liverpool could really get a head of steam up. Whereas now it's going to be all about can they grind things out for a little bit longer and try and just keep themselves in the Champions League running. But, the form was good before the break. I thought Darwin Núñez showed so many encouraging signs, and he's back amongst the goals in the friendly he played as well. So that's really good. And you've just got to think that time in this mid-season training camp, if there's been issues with fitness, which I think looked like a little bit of an issue, I think that disrupted preseason they didn't really sort of do enough maybe at the start. I think that could have been solved at this point. There's an opportunity to sign someone in January, whether they take it or not, we'll see. But, you'd like to think that Jurgen Klopp is very, very good at solving problems. And I think this, going into this City game, that's not the most important part of the season. I think it's what they do for the remainder of the Premier League season. But, you're hopeful that a lot of the problems have been solved and a lot of the groundwork's been laid for a more successful second half of the season. And Liverpool can, they have to finish in the top four for me. It's absolutely vital. And hopefully that, the game on Thursday can be a bit of a springboard to that.
Avi, how do you see Thursday? Guardiola's been in the headlines, hasn't he? Been complaining about the lack of players already. But how do you see sort of both teams lining up? Do you see strong lineups?
I think there will be strong lineups. And this season, it's one of those competitions where I don't mind if we bypass it in terms of, if we get knocked out on Thursday, we get knocked out on Thursday. It's always good to be in domestic trophies, just for the youngsters, especially last season, the likes of Minamino, who got, who took us, from that Leicester game and, played a pivotal part in the run up to the final. It's always good to win domestic trophies, but we've done that under Klopp now. We've taken the FA Cup seriously, the League Cup seriously. We've won those. For me, the big one is the Champions League now. The leagues, that's a bit of a, far-fetched now. I think Arsenal will City will run away with that. But, I want us to have a good run in the Champions League and maybe a good little FA Cup run. But with the League Cup, it is on Thursday. I think that we will play full strength. I think City will go full strength to what they can, and it'll be an interesting tie.
Okay, before we go, let's get a prediction from you guys as what the score is going to be on Thursday and where you see Liverpool finishing in the league table at the end of the season. David, you go first.
So I think it might, just because the teams have been away for a while, I think it might be a bit of a chaotic one on Thursday. So I'm going to go for 3-2 Liverpool. Hopefully a win there. And then in terms of where they finish in the table, I think maybe they'll just go on one of those crazy runs towards the back end of the season, like when they had the injuries at centre half, and maybe just end up somehow sneaking third.
Avi, 5-0 to Liverpool?
No, I think I'm going to stick with a modest 2-1 to Liverpool. And I think we'll finish third too. I think we'll go. I think we will. I think ourselves, Manchester City, and I know Arsenal have this season. But I think we've got it in ourselves to go on a 10 game, 15 game unbeaten run where we win, maybe 14 out of the 15. I think that'll be just enough. I think we've got players that didn't go to the World Cup. We've got players who were knocked out early and didn't get much game time. So we've been lucky in that respect. But yeah, Diaz is a big loss, but I think we'll do business. I wanted to pose a question to David. David, if there was one player that you realistically think, there's no insight here, but if there's one player that you realistically think that we could nab in January, who would it be?
I think, like I said, maybe Caicedo after the report I saw today. If that, I don't think it's out of the question that he would leave Brighton in January, and he's certainly a player that Liverpool have liked before. I'm not sure if that's going to lead to anything, but I think I really like him as a player, and I think he'd very much fit in a Klopp midfield. So, and to provide a boost to that midfield would be massive.
There you have it. We've heard Caicedo is coming in January. We'll edit that clip from David, put it on Twitter. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think that's everything. That's all we have time for.
What's your prediction for the game?
My prediction, look, although I don't want to sort of be seen as a pessimist, but although I'm looking forward to being part of the away end, it'll be I think it's about 5,000 allocation, isn't it, in the cup? I think because of people, sort of players coming back from the World Cup, even though City are probably hampered more than us, in a way, I don't want to go crazy in the cups because I want to consolidate the league. So I don't want to come out with a loss, but I'm not expecting much on Thursday. But I agree with you guys. I think we'll go on a massive run in the league. And I actually think we might finish second or third in the end. I really do think so, because we'll turn it on 10, 15 games on the bounce. We're capable of doing that. But we'll soon find out, won't we? We'll soon find out. But that's everything for tonight. Thank you very much. On the way out, please like and subscribe. If you're not following David on Twitter already, please go check him out. Give him a follow. Check out all the great work that he's doing. As regards to us, we'll see you on the road show on Thursday as Liverpool, sort of kick off their second half of the season. Thank you very much for watching, and adios.